So, hello, listeners. Welcome to Money Talk with Patrick. I'm your host, Patrick, creator of TC Trading and Trading Mentor. So, in today's episode, I would like to talk about a very unexpected yet hilarious topic that came into light within the past few weeks. The episode will be about how Reddit got the best out of billionaire hedge funds while memeing about it. I will also be talking about the reasons behind the podcast soft reboot and how these will affect my content in the future. So before starting, I would appreciate it if you guys share this episode with any of your friends who are interested in what's happening, just to spread the word. So hello once again, guys. I'm joined here with my friend Chris. I don't know if you want to say hello, Chris, just before going ahead with the episode.
Hey everyone, my name is Chris. I am one of Patrick's students and I took his course. And I'm in general, I'm just a guy that likes to spend a lot of time lurking on Reddit with a decent interest in stocks and the overall market.
That's also why I wanted to talk with you, bring you on the podcast because, of your potential views. I know that we're basically on top of the pop culture right now, with the millennial culture and all that. So with GME and with all this that's going on, of course, I have to give some thoughts. And I think that, it's best because I've thought of myself of being almost kind of in the conservative view or that kind of hedge fund view in some way because I have done some research on traditional portfolio management, portfolio investing, and so on. So you coming more from like pure retail, I think it's kind of like a best approach, because there's nothing such as a black or white scenario. It's always kind of like gray and it's very interesting. But in any case, just before we start, I wanted to address kind of like what this soft reboot is about, and the reason is that for all the listeners who are tuning into the podcast right now, they might you might see that the name has changed from TC Trading Podcast to Money Talk with Patrick. The main reason is because at the end of 2020, I learned a lot of lessons. I think for everyone, 2020 was a rough year. Uh, um, and one of the things that I learned is, and that I taught a lot in the course, is that you don't want to make trading your main focus. And I think you even know about this, because I've talked with you regarding like if you have a full-time job or a part-time job, how you accommodate trading to your lifestyle rather than you uh, moving your life around trading. So that's pretty much why I changed the name, just to take away the focus on only trading, saying, okay, trading can be a part of your wealth creation. It's, of course, it's a business. It's something that's feasible, but trading also has a lot of bad reputation because a lot of people don't do due diligence and they don't really have a strong risk management, and those a lot of people lose in the market. And that's also why I didn't want to focus all on it on trading. So it's basically the same podcast. It's just that I'm going to be talking more about broader terms, broader aspects of finance, wealth growth, financial planning. I'm going to be talking more about that. So I think that's everything I would like to say about the soft reboot. So let's get into the topic because we're going to be talking about how Reddit basically gave a huge blow, right, to this hedge fund. So I don't know if you want to give a couple words on the situation before that. What do you think?
So, if you've never heard about, well, I mean, it's been all over the news, unless you've been living under a rock. You've probably heard about GameStop and all the stocks going up like crazy. There was a massive spike around like a $500 peak, and everyone's getting crazy over it. Millennials are all over the place, and it's mostly heavily influenced by this Reddit sub called Wall Street Bets. Right. Yeah, I mean, well, at the end of the day, the thing is called Wall Street bets. It's not called Wall Street investments. It's literally bets. So people like it's if you've heard of the GameStop thing and haven't heard don't know much about the Reddit itself, it's just a message board where people just go and place, like you were saying, their losses or wins when they're investing in a certain stock or a certain asset. So people just usually put, you need to understand what Wall Street bets is. So when people go to Wall Street, like it's just this like meme community where people just do their daily due diligence, uh, and would post like, "Hey, I feel like this stock is gonna go up because of this, this, and this," and then people just kind of like talk on the topic. This is not there's a lot of misinformation going on around about it being like an organized uh, movement when it's really not. It's just a bunch of people just have some extra money on the side that just want to go invest. Sometimes people YOLO their their whole investments
Yes, yes.
into some stocks, but like this is more of a casino. Like people don't treat it as much more than that. It's just an unorganized casino where people just share their thoughts on stocks and actually post actual memes. It's a very fun place, but where like you were saying, it's grown a lot lately. Like a couple weeks ago, Wall Street Bets had 1.6
Yeah,
million
well, like 1.5.
followers. Right now, this morning it was almost 8.7 million. It's insane how much it has grown. It has definitely taken a turn on what it really is and what it stands for, but it's a very interesting place and situation on the internet that we've never seen before, to where you literally see that a subreddit with that many followers is changing and making
Yes.
hedge funds go broke. Like that's just something that's unheard of.
I mean, just being on the news and everywhere, because everyone literally knows about this. And this is why, I didn't really want to bother about speaking about the details of what happened rather than giving, more of our thoughts and briefly, going around it. And, you knew more than I did. Because you were more connected into the subreddit, even when we were speaking, through WhatsApp, and you were saying, hey, this GME and this stocks is going up, and we were talking about that. I didn't really get involved until I saw more about kind of like the financials behind, about this shorting, about what was really happening. That it really picked up my interest. But I think for the sake of, for the people who are listening, we would need to explain who is Deep. Uh, I don't know if we can say the word, but deep F value. That
Deep freaking value for the censored version.
exactly.
Deep DFB for short. This person, he's pretty much like, to a lot of people, he's kind of like the messiah of like GameStop. He's just this investor. He actually did like financial studies and everything, so he actually knows what he's doing. But around a year ago, he saw the opportunity of investing in GameStop when it was at its lowest. So he invested, I think, around initially around $50,000 on GameStop stocks when it was at its lowest, when they announced that business was not going well, possibly bankrupt, and all this stuff. And that's a very important part of the story. That's when hedge funds start shorting this company, and I'm sure Patrick will go into that in a second. But DFB, he bought $50,000 worth of his savings. He's not a wealthy man. He just saw an opportunity. He investigated this company and saw that they were going to change the way their market was working. They were going to change the way, because this is just a brick and mortar company. So in reality, the opportunity of GameStop like just lifting off of their of based on their current way of doing business is not manageable. So they're gonna go e-commerce. They're gonna start doing PC building stations and all this stuff. But like DFB knew all about this, but most importantly, he knew that it was gonna be heavily shorted. So this person was heavily informed, and over the time when he was being ridiculed. So initially, when he was posting all these DDs on Reddit, people were making fun of him because they were like, "How do you think a brick and mortar uh, company is gonna go and just lift off of the ground and get into this massive business when it's about to go bankrupt?" So it's very interesting to see him go from being ridiculed to become one of the most important characters in this story. He is actually now going to be on, what's it called?
A hearing, isn't it?
He's gonna
He's
be in a hearing with
fine.
the Robin Hood CEO. Like we came from a from a meme community to actual legal stuff where he's actually being investigated for manipulating stocks, quote unquote. Well, he's not really there for that, but like he's gonna be speaking about it. So it's great. It's crazy to know to see how this guy went from being completely ridiculed a year ago to literally being on a hearing right next to the Robinhood CEO.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
definitely. That's something that we're gonna be covering a little bit more in terms of how the media has tackled this, because I do have a lot to say in this regard. But let's go a little bit back into kind of like the finances, right? Because I mean, you taken my course, so you already know what shorting is. I gave a very brief explanation on how it's basically you getting or borrowing an asset so that you can sell it, and with a price volatility, if the market goes in your favor and prices go down, then you can repurchase those assets and then basically just give them back, and you get the profit, right, or the price difference. So that's basically what shorting is. Now, the way that I understand this, and as you already covered, is that these hedge funds, they were really shorting, and when I'm saying really shorting, I'm saying that they were shorting more than the total number of shares available, right? Which is something that's been going around in terms of the values and the data that's out there. So they were pretty much over leveraged on GameStop and other companies in terms of shorting. So of course, as you said, DFB saw this potential opportunity. Mainly, I don't know if it was really about uh, the hedge funds and how short it was, or if it was more of the value proposition of, okay, this stock is very, it's very devalued right now. We're in the middle of the pandemic, and they are trying to change into potentially, as you said, e-commerce and all this new stuff. So I don't know if it was something that he knew everything from the beginning, or he invested and then he started learning, and then that's when the realization comes that, oh, this is really being heavily shorted, and more people started joining because the price was going up.
So the story behind that is DFB did not like he knew there was a possibility of a squeeze, and we'll get to that in a second of how there's a possibility of one. But he was really just looking at the game at the company's value by itself. He was never basing his investment based on the squeeze till way later. He actually saw that there was a value in the company, and very important person in the story as well is I believe it's Steve Cohen. Um, he's actually in here, taking over as a CEO. Not CEO, my bad. Um, he's actually sorry, Ryan Cohen. It's Ryan Cohen who we're talking about. He stepped into GameStop. He is the original creator, CEO of Chewy, which is pretty much selling dog food at a loss, and then became a multi-million dollar company. And he's just stepping in, and GameStop, I think he announced that, and that really made the value go up because this guy literally made the whole dog company an e-commerce. So he literally raised from it and has the opportunity to change this company completely, like completely turn around. So this is a huge person that's involved in this, and DFB saw value in that as well. So pretty much his progress on his study came to a point where it came to fruition as in like, yes, GameStop can do this. They can change around their market. Ryan Cohen is gonna get involved. He's gonna put all this e-commerce experience in. I think last week they announced that even more people from his team, from the Chewy team, are involved. So even if we don't count anything of like social media going on, the Reddit, anything, like GameStop still has a possibility of getting a high value. And DFV saw this, and a year ago, where the stocks were like at $5 or something under that, and to see it go all the way to 500. I mean, this guy went from like $50,000 to a
Almost
possible,
50 million, isn't it?
yeah,
It's
almost
huge.
$50 million without even considering a squeeze, which is just insane. I mean, the guy obviously already sold a few portions of his share, but last time I checked, the guy was still holding his shares, as in like he knows there's something else coming up. So
Yeah,
a lot of people in the subreddit actually took him kind of like as a leader of like, if this guy is holding even at a point where it's going down or up, like this guy has to know something, when in reality he didn't even ask for it. Like he didn't ask to be the image or representation of a full subreddit just because he made a good financial investment. So it's exciting to see that he's gonna be doing the hearing, and hopefully he won't be involved in any legal stuff because in reality he's not responsible for anything. He just saw an opportunity
I
and
mean
took it.
that's just the power of the internet nowadays, isn't it? You know, a lot of things are happening. You know, I've talked about crypto. You can pretty much talk about anything, and the internet is kind of like this. How do you say? It's like this catalyst for really expediting and making everything accelerate 10 times, 100 times faster than it would normally do. And I think a lot of these companies have and hedge funds, they have not realized the power of the real internet and the power of kind of like decentralization of information and how everyone can make their own decision in the end, or they make their own decision, right? But the information is readily available for them to see and then take a judgment on that. Now the thing here that I also wanted to point out is that in terms of, of what was happening with the hedge funds, in terms of them kind of like shorting and depreciating the value or betting against the company in order to go bankrupt. I think most of them, they didn't realize, or they did with the mentality of Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster, what was doing before, they were selling movies, you could rent them and so on. And then, of course, they didn't adapt quickly enough to this new era with Netflix and with, streaming of different movies, different series out there. So they didn't really adapt quickly enough in order to make, to change the entire market or the entire industry that they were aiming at. Now, I think that there's a lot of lessons learned in that respect because, something similar is happening now where everything is going more digital. Instead of buying video games with a disc, a lot of people are starting to buy digital downloads, and there's a lot of even with Microsoft Xbox with this Game Pass, there's a lot of kind of like a new idea of having more of a Netflix for games rather than just having to purchase games individually, right? And these are all things that are going kind of against GameStop. But again, these are lessons that they can learn from the past, right? Learn about Blockbuster. And I think that, for instance, hedge funds didn't believe that this was potentially the case. Maybe they were thinking more like, okay, this happened with Blockbuster. This is kind of the same scenario. It's only for video games. Let's short it, instead of thinking like outside the picture and how can, these companies adapt. Because I think this is what GameStop is doing. And, we're going to be talking about the price in a moment. But for me, in the beginning, I was like, yeah, it makes sense if someone bets against GameStop because everything is going more digitally. Of course, they rely more on selling, kind of like having that commission when they sell games, right? Being Xbox, being PlayStation, with Sony, whatever. And just the fact that everything is going more digitally really put a threat on their backs, right? I think now they have the opportunity to kind of change, which is what you were talking about, Ryan Cohen, and all these like new turn into their business model, which might really make a big impact. So that's also why I think that there's a potential good opportunity on this regard. Now, talking about the price, only the price, I wanted kind of to give to be in the middle ground. I want to kind of give a neutral position, but I want to hear your opinions of just on the price. When you saw something going from, I don't know what it was like $5, $10. It was way less than that, going all the way to 500. Because I know that you were involved into that. What were your thoughts? Just looking at that price change.
So my story with GameStop is like if you've been on Reddit for a while, you've heard of Wall Street Bits at some point. Like their community is so massive that you get to see their posts on popular like all the time. So you've heard at some point. I heard about it a couple times, but I didn't really like had any interesting at the time to invest right away into a stock, especially when it was just pretty much a casino, because it's literally in the name. But eventually, one day, this post just got blown up about GameStop going from like just a few dollars to like 14, and it was like an 80% increase or something like ridiculous. So I heard about it and I was like, wow, that's weird. Like, and then you start reading all these DDs about it going even higher, and you're like, you know what? Okay, like maybe this is worth trying out. So I got in and like subscribed to this Reddit when GameStop's price was $33. Uh, then I invested $100 to be like, hey, this is just kind of like a fun meme stock that everyone's
Yeah,
talking about. Might as well just put like some money towards it, see where it goes, right? And I feel like that's the way a lot of people started thinking about this. It's like this thing just went up like almost 100%, and it might keep going up. Like, why not just put a few $100s or a few $1,000s if you have the money uh, on it? And then over the next couple of days, it goes up to like 66. And you're like, whoa, like what is going on? That's an increase of like hundreds 100% higher than the literally the last spike, and then it kept going higher and higher to the point where it gets to like it almost hit a 500 500 and something 513 I believe, like at some point, which was the highest peak that we've had over the last month, when it was literally a year ago violated $5. So
I
kind
know.
of like questioning yourself, like actual investors. So going back to what you were saying about hedge funds shorting it, from a logical standpoint, it makes sense that this was going to be the next blockbuster. But I feel like a lot of people didn't take into account hedge funds logically shorted. Their mistake was over shorting it because it had a shorting percentage of 140 something percent,
Yeah, at one
which
point,
is
right?
ridiculous. Like that should not even be possible in the first place. So their mistake was considering that it was going to be the next blockbuster. When GameStop, if you think about it, it's in a lot of people, like from a US standpoint, all the children that are now millennials that now have some capability of investing through Robinhood or simple apps like that, they grew up with those stores. There's this sentiment going around of GameStop was meant
Yeah,
for a
it's
lot
all
of
about
people a lot.
the nostalgia, isn't it?
It's
Of
nostalgia.
going
It's
to
similar
buy
to
your game,
Blockbuster.
midnight releases and all that. There's a lot of sentiment and feelings in there. And as you said, I think it's impressive because right now the people who are having more and more power is people like us, that we are young adults, that we are, starting to work, starting to get some savings, and you can't, well, you've seen it with the power of the internet. We are starting to be able to get our minds more um, educated regarding investing, regarding what's happening, and so on. One of the things here that I wanted to talk about, as you said, in terms of having a bet against the company, yeah, it made a lot of sense why hedge funds would be shorting uh, GameStop, for the reason that we said. Of course, as you said, the problem was that they were over shorting it. It was more than realistically should be the case. Now, something that I want to clarify, and mainly for for the listeners, of course, I'm not financial advisor or anything. This is my due diligence, and you always need to say that, because that's the truth. You don't want people to be blaming you for their actions when you don't
Exactly.
do research, and that's kind of like your opinion. And this is also why, in brackets for the title of this video, it's really an opinion, because this is kind of like our input. But in terms of shorting, shorting is a tool. And I think I've seen a lot of misconception even on Reddit, because people say it should be illegal. There's a good use of shorting. Because in reality, if you have a market that cannot be shorted, what you end up having is like in crypto in 2017. You know, I like crypto. I like where it's going. I like how it's maturing. But in 2017, it was purely these ICO bubbles, when companies would say, oh yeah, I have a cryptocurrency now, I'm releasing a paper, and everyone would be buying like crazy, just because they had a paper. They didn't have anything to show. They did not have any like real project going on, yet people would go and buy, and they would make kind of this bubble increase, right? That's why at the end of 2017, the futures market released for Bitcoin, giving the ability to short Bitcoin, and that's when this bubble popped, right? So there is good reasons for this, because in the end, if you would have had this financial instrument, this bubble might not even have happened
Exactly.
in that
Yeah.
time being. And it might have been good, because a lot of people who FOMO in at the end, in this euphoric peak, a lot of them lost everything. I mean, I have not even told my story yet. I might do it in another episode, but I made a lot of money in the cryptocurrency peak, and I lost the same money that I made, because I was not ready. Because the internet has not seen such euphoria before. But now coming into GME, that's why I was more cautious, because now I have the experience of looking how that behaved, and that's when initially I was like, okay, you know what, this might be another bubble that's gonna come down, and that's why I stayed on the sidelines for a long time, just watching what's happening. Uh, Mainly not to FOMO, at 300, 200. That's what I'm waiting. Uh, but something that it might be really good to talk about is how everything changed, really, right? As you said, from Reddit, it was not really about, yeah, let's get the hedge funds. That from the beginning, it wasn't kind of like, it wasn't a movement at all. It was literally just a bet, or someone saying, this might be this is my opinion, this is my view on the market, I think there's a good opportunity here, and then other people joining. But the interesting part for me is how this became like a real movement against Wall Street, right? And this comes when there's a lot of not backslash, but there's a lot of, how do you say, push from the other side. You know, uh, Things going out with Robinhood, restrictions on trading. Uh, that, of course, you might think like, there's a reason for that, but the way that they handle it, the way of the communication, because something that I've learned is that transparency and communications is going to be key right now, because with the internet we have a lot of information, much more than we can handle at one time. So if you're not clear from the beginning, that's where everything goes wrongly. And I'm talking mostly about Robinhood, because on a technical side, on a legal standpoint, there's a reason why all these restrictions happen. But just the fact that they were just not straightforward, they were not communicating properly, makes the idea that uh, that the retail investors were attacked, which in a sense they were, and this is why this is not black and white. This is just a big gray mess in terms of, there's a lot of things that are true, there's a lot of things that are not, there's a lot of things that we don't even know. Uh, because talking about Robinhood and the restrictions, it feels like it really feels like sabotage. Like when you see the stock growing up so high, and then all of a sudden you cannot buy, or you're restricted to buy a certain amount of stock, but yet you can sell those stock, right? And all of a sudden, everything is halted if you want to buy, but if you want to sell, you can, yeah, for sure you can do it. And there's all this questioning beginning with what is it, Melvin Capital with this Citadel, and in which these hedge funds are basically, that they are shorting, right? And you know that they are
Yep.
supporting each other. And then all of a sudden, for retail investors, hey, you cannot buy. And that's where I think this started heating up as a movement, because people started to realize, hey, then why just not let you don't let us trade, basically. And and
Yeah.
this is kind of like when you start seeing Democrats, Republicans, people with opposite views pretty much uniting over this topic, saying, hey, yeah, if Wall Street made a bet, you have to be you have to recognize that in the end, the stock market is a bet. Maybe even if you're
Exactly.
investing, it either goes up or goes down. You can't control the market, and you can make wrong decisions. And this was definitely the wrong decision by Wall Street, or by this fund, because it's not the entire Wall Street. And that's kind of like another misconception that I think people are talking like it's us against them, whether there's a lot of funds that they were even purchasing GameStop as well. This is just a big mess, I would say. But I mean, what do you think about that?
So I think that that was their big mistake. Their big mistake is, like we said initially, this was just they made this bet, we made this, so we made this one. So it was just kind of like okay, you messed up. Now it's your time to pay. Like whether you're a hedge fund or whatever you are, it doesn't matter. You made a bet that this was going to get super shorted, and you thought that the company was going to go bankrupt. You are actually causing people to lose their jobs, but you're perfectly fine with it by shorting it for 140%, which is, shouldn't even be possible in the first place. And then people start making money out of it when they start investing on it because they don't want it to go away. It's kind of like, well, you messed up. Now's the time for you to pay. Like whether you go bankrupt or not, that's not the retail investor's problem. That is your own problem. But then you start seeing illegal movements of like Robinhood just stepping in, which is also like associated with Citadel. Like they're one of the investors, so they kind of have to have a hand on it. But the U.S. is well respected for their laws and how there's nothing kind of like in a gray area most of the time, and like you got to respect it. But then you have all these hedge funds like just literally breaking the laws by limiting your purchasing but not limiting your selling, and then they make up these excuses of like it's a capital thing where they need to have a certain amount of money in their bank to be able to pay it in
Exactly.
case the hedge funds can't. And it's pretty unfair. That's exactly the moment where it goes from, oh, we're gonna make a lot of money to this, to, oh, now this is a movement, because you're messing with the market. You're not just paying what you owe, you're literally messing with the market to try to get out of it, and on top of that you're trying to make money out of it. So that's where you tick people off. I mean, that's where hedge funds like have this really boomer mentality of, yeah, we have the control over it, like there's no way
Yeah,
these guys are gonna win.
exactly. Yeah, I think you're nailing it, and that's exactly what I was thinking in terms of Robinhood, because it is a fact that they have to comply with regulations. Every broker does, and it is a fact that I think it's called a depository trust company that basically gives guidelines of how much uh, these brokers have to pay in anticipation. And I think it's called a T+2 days, when if you are buying a stock, they give the 10% down payment or something like that. Then in 2 days they actually fulfill that order, and you get the stock as a customer. So I think the problem, or one of the problems in that respect, was that because of the volatility, they wanted to charge kind of like a premium or increase that initial deposit, which made it so that I think even they even stated, Robinhood, that they were charged, well, not charged, but they were required to give like 3 billion almost in liquidity because of the trading volatility. So it's definitely, the thing here is that it's a big mess, right? Because it's everything at the same time, where you know that there's some kind of like links to Citadel, to other hedge funds, but at the same time they are required for these regulations. And the truth is that there's a lot that we don't know, and that's a problem, right? There is not enough transparency so that we can say, oh, this is what happened. So this is why a lot of people are speculating on a lot of things, and probably a lot of this. I mean, I guess you can call them conspiracies, or maybe the reality is that you can't prove that it's the case, but you can't also prove the other side. There's a lack of clear information out there, and that's exactly the problem. Because if this was the case, they might have just went down and say, we are required by law to give this kind of like money, but we don't have it, so we're going to have trading, but not only have trading for buying, but also for selling, right? So basically, just be like, hey, until we pay this money, there is no more trading at all. And this is where the downside happens, because you are allowed to sell, but you are not allowing to buy. So you are biased towards the selling side,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
That's the main problem.
That is the problem.
Because if you will have seen them doing like, okay, we're just halting trading at all, and say I'm giving like a those PR updates saying, this is the situation. For this reason, we're just gonna close the trade at all. You're not going to be able to buy, but you're also not going to be able to sell until we fix that problem, which is what didn't happen. And that's, again, where all this movement became more heated, right? uh, Now, one of the things that I really wanted to touch on as well was, even for me, like, the more I read about what was happening with Wall Street bets, the more I read about what people did. Like, that's what really got into me, and why I decided to buy some of it, some of GameStop and some of AMC. And the reason is because I saw people really doing good things when they got the money, right? When
Right.
they betted as well,
Yeah.
and they, with the earnings, they were really giving out to charity. They were, the one that I saw that was, really strong for me, was that a guy bought a lot of switches and went to a children's hospital just to give them away for free. They were doing a lot of charity. I saw people rewarding, workers at GameStops. You know,
Yep.
at restaurants, they were giving like huge tips just to be like, hey, you know what? I got something positive that I was not expecting. I want to give something good back into the world. I saw a lot of posts of people that, that they were suffering, and maybe they have like someone needed surgery. Now they had the money to pay for their family members. Uh, and
Yep.
that's something that you don't see with the hedge funds, right? Because
Ever.
uh, even if because I know that there's some philanthropists out there, but you don't really focus on, hey, we made a killing, let's spread it, let's give away some of it, because it's kind of like a moral. I don't want to say it's a duty, but it's like fading humanity restored. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't
Yeah.
see that from these big companies. And this is why I got more passionate into this topic, because when I saw that, I was like, these people are good. And I thought of myself, like, even if I bought GME or whichever stock that's into this, uh, I would rather prefer to lose my money against people who are selling because they're good, they're doing good things with it, or they're giving to charity, than blatantly losing it against a hedge fund, or blatantly losing it against people who don't care. And I'm saying this because I come from the cryptocurrency community and cryptocurrency market, with, man, no one gives no one gives a crap about each other. It's literally, I want money and I want you to buy, because I know that if you buy, the price increase, and it's all for me. And it's like uh, buyers versus sellers, longers versus shorters, and each side really despise the other. It's like, hey, I hope you go bankrupt, I hope that you lose everything, and I'm gonna get it from you. All that entire switch from this community, I was like, you know damn, like, people really
Yeah.
care,
Yeah.
people really have motivation, and really have a good they believe in something good, and they are willing to be like, okay, I received this much, well, I'm gonna give it back in some way, just to keep kind of like this chain of good deeds.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many psychological aspects to this subject, because there's one side which is the math is in our favor. We're gonna get a short squeeze and a few gamma squeezes out of this, and we're gonna make a lot of money. You have the investors who are like straight headed, like this is gonna happen, we're gonna make money. Then you have the people who hate the big companies, the hedge funds are like, you know what? F the hedge funds, we don't want to do it. Like we just want you to go down. I will take a loss as long as you pay interest on it, because I know that even if I like lose $1,000 in a day, you're gonna lose millions. So I don't care. Yeah, even if it goes down to zero, I will keep and hold to my shares just so you pay interest on them for heavily shorting this market. And then you have other conspiracy theories who think other stuff, and then you have the hedge funds own side of like we gotta like defend ourselves. We gotta somehow not go bankrupt because at the end of the day, you gotta consider that as much as of a jerk that these people are, they still have jobs and they that's their money. It's like at the end of the day, everyone wants to make some money, but there's this sentiment of like a few people, like you mentioned, this really popular guy who made, I think he only made $30,000 on, he didn't make like millions, he just made $30,000. He decided to go buy 10 switches, give it out of hospitals. Some people paid their student debt, like you were saying. Some people paid off their mortgages. Some people brought their families from other countries. Like, this is life changing opportunities for a lot of people. And
Definitely.
then that's the sentiment from like 8 million people and one sub, seeing how these hedge funds who are billionaires who are like about to lose their boats because they have to sell them because they're going bankrupt. Like, dude, you have a great life. Like, there was this one that really pissed off everyone off, which is, this is the kind of like news headlines that you see that really upset people. Of like, hedge fund manager says that he's just quote unquote trying to make a living.
Even, yeah, I
Like,
remember
dude,
that one.
you're not trying to make a living. You're just trying to buy your fifth boat or your fourth house or your whatever. These people are actually helping out other people. And it's crazy. It's beautiful to see how many people have cleared out debts and helped out other people, just because this is a retail investor. This is your average person who put $1,000 on it, $500 on it, and if they got really early onto this, they made a load of money later on. And there's a lot of people just hoping to have some sort of chance against these huge markets. And a good subject about this is how much more access people have nowadays. It's no longer back in the day where you need to actually go to college to study finance to actually get into investments and stocks and all this stuff. Now you're literally 2 clicks away from just investing your first stock. You get to hear from, like, I heard Mark Cuban's kid invested their own money like on buying 2 3 shares of AMC or GME just because they heard of it on TikTok. Like, this is such a huge internet movement now at this point where like people just don't even care about the money as much, but it's more about how everyone else, all the hedge funds and the government have manipulated the market into like not even giving the retail investor a chance. So the mentality of this whole movement is so strong that that's why it keeps going. That's why it's not really fading away. Like, you even see the GameStop price go down, and still see thousands of people post daily like, "Hey, I'm still holding just because I want to make a difference."
Yeah. And
So
and
I
it's
feel
all
like
this
that's very important.
diamond hands movement, right? And
Yeah.
and you know, I think in terms of describing what you just said is that this is basically the best wealth distribution that there has been in a long, long time, because you're not talking about affecting the livelihood of people with billions, right? Like, they already have that much money. They already have the assets. If they lose millions, if they lose billions, it's not like, they're going to be on the street homeless. That's almost a fact, because they probably already invested into real estate or whatever.
Yeah.
But on the opposite side, you're really helping a lot of people, or people are really changing their lives, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like what's very important. And even in the subreddit right now, it's very messy, because you went from 1.5 million to 8.5 million people, and now there is a lot of uh, controversial topics and a lot of different opinions, and some of them are positive, some of them maybe are from people who are trying to sabotage the movement. Like, it reached this point that it's so big that you can't know for sure. But something that I'm pretty certain that we know for sure is that take on the news outlet. And this is, just before almost finishing with today's episode, is something that I wanted to cover. And this is kind of like me giving partly a rant about it. I would guess is that disappointment on the lack of research and misinformation by a lot of the media. And it's crazy, like, and it really makes me mad, because it's a lie. If you take 5 minutes to research, to go into the subreddit and actually read through the people's comments, read through what has been posted from different videos, you would get the right perspective. But yet, you write such outrageous headlines that are just fake. Just to give some examples, they
Yeah.
were talking about the silver squeeze right in the moment, saying, "Oh, now Reddit wants to squeeze silver because there's a lot of hedge funds that are trying to short it." But you go back into the subreddit. There's nothing about silver. In fact, people are saying, you should not do this because they're trying to kind of like deviate the attention from GME into silver. And it was almost the same thing with Dogecoin at one point, because I think there's different communities, right?
Yeah.
I know that there's these new communities, Satoshi bets, Wall Street. No, there's Satoshi Street bets, I think. I mean, this is kind of like out of context, but from what I know, Wall Street bets don't really like kind of like the crypto community. And the reason, I mean, I do understand the reason, and I do agree with it, is because the crypto community can be very toxic, and most of they are mainly busy on shilling coins rather than really caring about the movement or about what's happening, which I think that's the main difference. But I mean, regardless of that, the point is that they were trying to portray like, oh yeah, this subreddit, these people did all this when it was not the reality, right? And I think even one of the headlines were like, oh, this subreddit is basically from the extreme right group, and they're being misogynistic, and they're
Yeah.
being this and that. Well, man, in fact, we probably are kind of like more liberal in our mindset that most people, because it's young people in there. It's people who believe more than I don't want to say everyone, because there's a lot of people in there that might have different opinions, but if we're there, it's because we have a broader mindset that
Yeah.
the average boomer, I would say, right? And I just wanted to to literally just bring the news outlets that I've seen that they were pretty much lying, which was like CNN, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Bloomberg, in some of their posts, that they were kind of like giving misinformation if you are into the group. And I've been wondering, what do you think about that? Because I mean, honestly, I'm kind of like ranting at some point, but I don't think it's unjustified in this case.
This is when it starts when you start diving more into the conspiracy theories of like, are the news media outlets actually biased and getting paid for by the hedge funds to report on stuff that is not accurate? So you have news headlines like, say, like, oh, the squeeze already happened. People are jumping onto other stocks. People are jumping onto silver, like you mentioned. Like, no one, not a single person on Reddit started like promoting silver when they're literally at the peak of the GameStop movement. When all these news media outlets, because this was before like the huge spike, like CNN, MSNBC, all these like huge media outlets are reporting first the silver thing, then the subreddits somehow managed like by alt right people, and then there's so many fake news out there, and I hate using the term fake news because it's been
Yeah, I
misused
know.
for such a long time, but like you could literally experience it as one of the 8 million members, how all these news outlets like are promoting that people need to jump onto something else. And you start thinking, okay, like, if, because there was one of the important news headlines was like, oh, Melvin Capital already covered all their shorts, like they're out, and you see ads being ran for it. Like, why are you running ads
Doesn't
for
make
to
sense.
let people know that
Yeah,
people are out? Like, if people are still holding, let them hold. Like, if you already covered, why are you paying ad space to promote that they already covered their
yeah.
shorts?
Why would you try to push this narrative if it's
Why would, yeah,
already done,
exactly,
right?
like, if it's already done, why publish it? Like, at this point, if they actually cover the shorts, then people will start losing money by buying even more. So why promote it? Why keep, and you keep seeing it every single day over the
Yeah,
last 2 weeks. GameStop's going down. Oh yeah, GameStop's going down. Oh, people are jumping onto the next one. People are trying to to create a silver squeeze when the silver squeeze is pretty much from, and this might be misinformation on my part, but like, it's pretty much, it has a huge market cap. Like, causing a silver squeeze is highly unlikely on that market, and you could see that Reddit is not. promoting that whatsoever. Like they might talk about BlackBerry, Nokia, but because these are like other markets that have been shorted as well, or like where some people see some investment worthy companies like BlackBerry's now they're not doing their main market is not cell phones anymore. They're doing cybersecurity now. So people are like, oh, jump into BlackBerry. Like, yes, Wall Street Bets is not like a GameStop movement only. Like they
Yes.
have other stocks in mind. Like AMC was a huge part, like side hustle from this movement as well, because there were both companies that were going bankrupt, that were getting shorted, one way higher than the other, but they're still like being promoted because people have this sentiment of like, I think AMC can come back after COVID and all this stuff. But you cannot just promote fake headlines where like it's literally coming from a boomer standpoint of let's just hop on something that no one else is talking about. And then just like you were saying before, this whole point is it's just it's a weird thing. You gotta consider that they're somehow involved. Like CNN and then all the news outlets have like are on the hedge fund side. They're part of the that top 1% who's making all this money on this
Yeah.
stuff.
I mean,
You don't want the retail investor to have this much power, and I feel like this is key for it more than the GameStop movement being over or whatever. I feel like they just don't want the retail investor to have this much power, because you saw GameStop go from nothing to an insanely overrated price. And you can call it a bubble and whatever you want, but this was the power of the internet. This is the power of people who want to change. This is the power of people who just want to make some money, like the hedge funds are doing right now.
yeah,
It's literally just reverse. It's a role reversal. Like the retail investor now has power to drive all these people to buy a stock that they see worth on, and hedge funds who had control for so many decades, for so many years, now are like, what do we do now? And you got to adapt, you got to regulate it differently. You can't just stop people from being able to trade. That's just, to me, that should be completely legal. And then you see these halts when the price goes up, when it starts just pumping and pumping. You see the stock going up, and you see all these halts that the SEC is putting onto it. But if it starts going down like by 60% in the matter of an hour, no one's doing anything. So you gotta at least consider in some way, shape, or form that other people are involved in this, and this is so much bigger than the retail investor. But like people are underestimating the power of the internet by how many 8 million people are, and this is not just Reddit. This is the most important part. Like Reddit was not the first one to hop on the GameStop movement. It was so many other like message boards that are here and there. People that saw that this was heavily short. It was just a math problem in the beginning, and everything the hedge funds did was make it and piss off online people. And then you have everyone saying go buy GameStop on Reddit, on TikTok, on Instagram,
yeah.
on Twitter. It was Robinhood was trending for a full day number one of when they stopped trading all the when they stopped letting people buy. So you're driving the price down literally artificially by literally not letting your retail investor, who are the people against your movement, who are actually driving the price up, you're stopping them from doing anything. So as much as the conspiracy theories some people can get, you got to at least consider that there's
Yeah, yeah,
really a lot
yeah,
of misinformation out there.
yeah. I know. I mean, I share the same feeling. To an extent, and I mean that's why I really was kind of like ranting mainly on the news outlets, because it's that one thing that you can't really know if they're lying or not, because you are seeing the situation, you are in the subreddit, you see the comments, you see the posts, and then you see the headlines. And at one point I was thinking, okay, are they doing it because they're clickbaiting, they just want the views, or are they really doing it because they're sided with with the hedge funds and everything? And as you said, just the way that they're trying to push that narrative so hard, and how like all of a sudden when the price went tumble like more than 50% in one day, uh, all of a sudden, everything stopped regarding silver. All of a sudden, everything stopped regarding other things. It's kind of like very, very convenient on the timing, which makes you feel kind of like, like this is way too convenient to be happening at the same time. And that's where, you know, all these kind of ideas come up that, it might be true that they're all kind of like gathering together against the retail trader, which, in the end, as you said, the internet is very powerful. uh, I've seen it even, with crypto. The idea of decentralizing is key. It's gonna be key even going into the future, and probably, because it's already been almost an hour, so it's time to wrap up the episode. But probably we will be able to talk more about decentralization, the power of the internet, in another episode, and how that will impact our economies, right? And more than anything, you and I, as a millennial, how is that impact the way that we invest, the way that we make money? Because it's going to be completely different to what boomers did a long time ago, which, housing was way cheaper. They probably were earning more money in terms of inflation, against right now. Probably they have better opportunities to buy real estate cheaper, just hold it. Then 10 years, 15 years, 20 years after, it worth 5 times, and that's where you get a lot of people, old people, with a lot of money. But do we have the same opportunity? I don't think so. I think that we are creating our own opportunities, and definitely the internet is one of those tools that we need to use, and we need to keep kind of like censor free. We need to keep it like unmanipulated, because that was even a big topic in the US, when they wanted, what was it called, when they wanted, like, different companies, the ISPs and so on, to control the speed of your internet based on which web.
Net neutrality.
Exactly, that net neutrality, that's a big thing. And I think, if something, if any of the listeners are still here, if there's something that we really need to fight for, it's kind of like this transparency and decentralization of power in terms of the internet, because that's, at least for us, it's gonna be our voice. That's is basically what's really gonna help us, not only build wealth, but also like make an impact, a positive impact in the world. So I think it's time to wrap this up. I just want to end it. Where do we go from here? Yeah, and this is, purely subjective, because we don't really know. In my opinion, I think, in terms of the price, in terms of what we were talking more about, kind of like the financial side, I would say, you know, there, obviously there is a big fact is that there's been low liquidity, right? Because it's been a lot of shorters, or a lot of people who are frenzy buying. So there's no middle ground. It's not like, we're at a state that, yeah, it might be overvalued, but does that even matter? No, it doesn't, right? It's more about kind of like what is happening with these emotions, with this story, with this movement. That's going to be more important than the economics behind it. And that's what these people, and the people who are shorting all these hedge funds don't understand, is that this is not really about economics. There's nothing like, oh yeah, it should be value $10, it's going to be $10. No, that's over. The internet is here. People are here. They're getting more educated. They're getting involved. So I mean, I wouldn't doubt that if this keeps holding, if the whole movement keeps holding, this might be the first time that, we can see some hedge funds getting liquidated for using margin and shorting, and potentially see that price going up. It really depends on what the people do, how they stick together, because I know that there's been, when everything's up and euphoric, you will see a lot of movement, but when things are down is where you see the real strength, and what people real the people's real intent is, right? And when things are at their low, where, when there's blood on the streets, that's when you see what the movement is really about. So, if that's the case, then I don't doubt that the stock will go even lower. What's your standpoint on all this?
So where do we go from here? I feel like a few things should or might happen. Is that with a few politicians, even Republicans and Democrats, agreeing in the subject of like people should be able to manipulate the market, hopefully we'll see some kind of change in regulations on how stocks and even cryptocurrency has to have to be managed. There's just this can't be repeated. That's one point. Another point is hedge funds will be way more careful with what
Yes.
they short and how much they short it for. because this just cannot be repeated again as well. This is no one will take such a huge chance of someone finding out that that a said company is going to get insanely shorted, and don't expect from people to jump into it like all of a sudden. Like, people are going to be way more aware of this. And then the hearing also with the Robinhood CEO and DFB and everything like that, I feel I we need to get something out of that. Like, I hope DFB gives a good image to Reddit, and that this doesn't come off as like a market manipulation from a retail
Yeah,
investor standpoint, but more as of a, like, we need to regulate this a little bit more. And something that we already saw happen is, like, with all this craze of GME being manipulated and AMC as well, is that cryptocurrency is going to take a huge chunk of all these clients of, like, okay, everyone wants something decentralized. I'm not going to let anyone manipulate the market anymore, so I'm going to move on to an asset that cannot be manipulated and completely decentralized, which is why pretty much Dodge coin increased so much in price over the last few days. Is like, people saw that AMC got halted, and AMC and GME got halted, and pretty much like messed with. So they were like, you know what, whatever, let's just pump Dutch coin
yeah,
and see where we go from there.
and
So there's a huge chance for cryptocurrency to make its way, to open its way more into like a common market, and hopefully a few decades from now, it becomes used as a main
yeah,
currency.
definitely. I mean, what you're hinting is at the decentralized finance, which is huge in crypto. That's something worth looking at. Not counting in the pumps and dumps in different cryptos, because that still happens. But decentralized finance is that big deal. That's a whole other topic. Another thing, just before finishing, that that kind of popped in my mind while you were talking, is that these hedge funds took it for granted. They took the opportunity for granted, because even you went through my course, and we went through trading, and one of the most important parts is risk management, right?
Right.
Definitely, they did not have risk management, because even as a hedge fund, you would need to consider the downside if you're wrong, right? So these people definitely are manipulating the market, and they are so good at it, and no one has challenged them, that they took it for granted. And this is what happened, because you should have had stops. You should have had a plan to cover your positions if things went wrong, and clearly they didn't, because
Yeah,
they blew like 20 billion. They needed to be almost bailout, injection from another company.
they didn't have an exit plan. That was it.
Exactly. And so, it's going to be very interesting. Hopefully, I think, definitely we will have kind of like a part two, maybe some weeks, seeing how this develops, what happens with the hearing and everything. But well, any case, Chris, thank you very much for joining me. It was a pleasure to have you. I feel like, talking with someone of what's happening, it's clearly more relatable. Not only that, it's also a real perspective on what's happening, because it's not like, oh yeah, these professionals are talking. It's this, this is the view of most people, what we think is happening. So thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So, in any case, listeners, I hope that you enjoyed this episode of Money Talk with Patrick. 2021 will surely be an exciting year for the markets and for the memes, for sure. Remember to always do your due diligence before investing, and never risk more than you can afford to lose. So, thank you very much for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.